Hey everyone, pro photographer Ian Plant here, your host of PhotoMasters. And in this video, I am interviewing a very talented nature photographer. His name is Nikhil Bahl. I've known Nikhil for many years. He takes these amazing impressionistic nature photos. So if you want to learn more about his work and how he approaches the art of photography, well, stay tuned. Hey, Nikhil Bahl, welcome to PhotoMasters. So glad you could join us today.
All right, thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Well, very quickly, why don't you tell us your origin story as a photographer? So if you can do this in 2 minutes or less, tell us how you got into photography, what motivates you, what inspires you, and specifically how your origin story intersects with mine.
Yeah, actually, it all started with a visit to the Grand Canyon. It was kind of one of those times where I was very excited to visit a location because I hadn't been there before. I'm talking like in 2006 or 2005. And I remember driving up to the South Rim and I still couldn't see the canyon itself. I pulled into the parking lot, walked through the trees, and like my jaw dropped because I've seen so many photos of the Grand Canyon, but like nothing did what I saw justice. I went through that whole day stopping at a lot of the overlooks, and I just thought to myself, I got a lot of not so good photos from a point and shoot camera I owned at the time. And I got back home and I said, I want to have my jaw dropped more often. And I want to learn how to actually take photos that allow me to be more expressive in terms of how I felt on location. And so that's kind of how it all started. As far as the intersection of our photography, I mean, we were obviously living fairly close to each other at one point. So we would run into each other in the field or even in photography events, etc. So yeah, that was always fun.
Yeah, we both lived in the Washington, D.C. area at the time. I, of course, have relocated to Minneapolis now. And I do remember specifically a great photo shoot we had on Smith Island in the Chesapeake Bay many, many years ago.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
You said earlier that you're looking to create those jaw-dropping photographs. How do you do that? So let's talk about your personal approach to photography and how you do things maybe a little different from other photographers, how you create those magical moments that are going to make people's jaws drop.
I don't know if it's always my goal to, have a jaw drop, but I try to stay true to the moment, true to what inspires me, true to what's in front of me, and what I'm seeing, and it kind of flows through everything from the moment I capture the image or the moment I see the subject to the capture and even through the processing. So I try and stay true to the moment as much as possible. I don't rely too much on post-processing to create a certain kind of look and feel. I'm trying to do things in camera. And, I feel like by staying true to the moment and being in the moment, I'm able to be more expressive with my photographs. And I think that seems to help one way or the other.
Yeah, your photographs definitely are very expressive. And if I were to describe them myself, I think I would describe them as expressive minimalism. And a lot of times in your photographs, what I find very interesting is that the subject might be a very small part of the overall visual design. So this photograph here, for example, when I first looked at this, I was attracted to the really dynamic curving shape of the wave hitting the shore. It wasn't until I looked at the image larger that I realized that there was a penguin in the water down there. And
Right.
and so like the penguin is very minimal in this photograph, but it's still really dynamic. And I found that discovering the penguin there was just this element of pleasant surprise for me as the viewer of this photograph. And so, tell me about your approach with a photograph like this. I think most people would want to zoom in on that tiny penguin and make it larger, but you took that wider approach. So how is it when you're making photos like that, that you make that decision to do this? How do you resist that temptation to do what I think most people would do?
Right. I think a lot of nature photographers, at least, it tends to be when you're photographing birds and animals, you're trying to photograph the animal just itself. But to me, the environment is what tells the story. With this image, what we're trying to do is show the penguin at the entry point of where they climb up the cliff. And there's a story to be told there. And by trying to just photograph the penguin in this situation, I felt like I would not be telling that story. So generally speaking, I'm trying to create a simplistic photograph and yet try and tell a story with it. So if you go down to just the animal, sometimes the story is simply what the animal looks like, whether it's a raggedy looking animal or an animal that's in pristine condition. But I feel when it comes to environmental photographs, which is what I consider this one, there is so much more opportunity to create images that are different. Because while the penguin, one rockhopper penguin compared to another rockhopper penguin doesn't look very different, you definitely use the environment and what's going on around the penguin to make a different photograph, but more importantly, tell a story with the photograph. And I think that's generally my approach.
Yeah, I often tell people that your subject isn't your subject. Your subject isn't the rockhopper penguin. Your subject
Right.
is the overall visual design, the
Right.
overall story that you're telling. So your subject here, it could be that giant curve of the wave, that overall visual design where the penguin is just an element of that visual design is your subject. Or the way you put it, your subject is the entire story. And so you want to show the scale of the cliff that the penguin needs to ascend. That really tells the story about this animal and the environment that it lives in. And I find that storytelling to be such an important part of all of your photography. And so here you took that narrower approach. You're more zoomed in, but I love the moment that's captured here. And so I think this is fantastic. This is proof that you can make an effective photograph no matter what your subject is. You don't have to go out there and find the most bizarre, exotic landscape or the most charismatic megafauna wildlife subject. You can go out there and photograph something a little bit that's mundane. This is probably just a, like a seagull chick or something like that. But it's still a great photo because of the lighting. The lighting is so expressive. And the moment, the cute moment of this chick jumping up in the air. And I really love how you softly process this photo. There's not a lot of contrast. It's very airy, very ethereal, somewhat high key. And I find that very common to many of your photographs. So let's talk about that, your approach when you're in the digital darkroom.
As I mentioned earlier, I think I'm still trying to stay true to the moment, even with the post-processing. So what I'm trying to do in camera with the light, using the backlighting to my advantage, and I have some level of dewdrops on that particular photograph on the grasses, which really helped kind of create those orbs and create a little more mood in the photograph as well. In a lot of my photographs, I look for graphic elements, circles, lines, curves, etc. And I'm trying to again stay true to the moment. And like this image that you showed, these last two images are more high contrast images, but that's true to that particular moment. And this black and white image is more to bring out the graphic nature of the trees. And I didn't do anything to the background. It was just really hazy. I've just increased the contrast a little bit to the point where, you really can't see a whole lot in the background. And that's still kind of staying true to the moment because there was only like subtle parts of the mountain that were visible. But I just loved the graphic element in this photograph. And that's what I went for.
Yeah, your focus with a photograph like that is more on the shapes and the overall artistic design.
Yeah.
And getting back to what we were saying earlier, that is your subject. And so the ability to see these creative compositional shapes and to work with these abstract visual elements, I think is critical for every photographer to learn. And so I think studying your work and seeing how you've approached that is something that could benefit everyone. And I just generally just love this expressive approach. even when you're photographing something that isn't quite abstract, when you're taking a more conventional approach, it still feels like you're working hard to capture an expressive moment. And so that's another element of your photography. So you're not just looking for the shapes, you're not just looking for the visual design or the story. You're also looking for these moments of convergence when there are random compositional shapes coming together in a very dynamic way or a very dynamic story being told. And, once again, I just love how you've got these little touches. So this is a photo that I think would be great on its own, just a beautiful sunrise behind this tree. But the bird that is taking off or landing at the top of the tree, it's a very small element. It doesn't catch your eye when you're looking at the thumbnail, but when you look at it at a larger size, it's this little discovery. It's this little nugget that you find that you don't see right away. And I think those little details tell a lot about the story, and they add so much to the visual design.
I almost look at this, or it can be looked at as a landscape with a bird in it or a bird in its environment. Both ways are, I think, perfectly valid. It depends on how the viewer sees it. But yeah, what I'm trying to do is just like I said earlier, I'm trying to keep it simple, but I'm trying to tell a story. And, that story could be that bird landing in its nest, at sunset, bringing you food. Now you can't see that, but I'm still looking for a shape that, obviously I'm not taking one photograph here. I'm shooting in burst mode so I can get that shape. And I felt like the V shape was the most attractive to the eye and actually brought your attention to the bird the best as well. So yeah, I'm just trying to keep it simple and tell that story.
Yeah, in the video game world, they call these Easter eggs, these little hidden discoveries that are kind of special moments. That's what I think of when I'm thinking of a composition like this, that the bird is the Easter egg. It's a hidden discovery, but it makes all the difference in this photo. That dynamic V shape that you mentioned with the wings outstretched, that helps draw the viewer's attention to that point. So that small, tiny bird becomes a powerful point of interest in this composition, and it really takes it to the next level. And I find that to be common with a lot of your photographs, just that one small but crucial detail that really makes everything come together. I love the story in this photograph. Once again, the crab is a bit of an Easter egg. When you're looking at the thumbnail, you see the bird, but you don't see what else is going on. And really what you see is a bird butt. And so your first reaction might be, well, this is not a very good photo. But then when you look at it larger and you see the crab and that expressive pose that it has, that is definitely telling a story. I look at this image and the story I get is either the crab is got a defensive posture. This is a moment of interaction and aggression in the animal world. The other story I see in this photo is that these two animals are friends and the crab is telling a fish story. I once caught a fish this big.
Well, I call this photograph, "You want a piece of me?" That's how I see it. And that's really what was happening. The bird just, I usually don't photograph a whole lot of gulls, but one of the things I like to do is when I can't find another subject to photograph, I always keep an eye on the gulls because they're always doing something. And this one just brought out this, I think it's a blue crab if I'm not mistaken, but it just brought out this blue crab from the ocean, dropped it on the sand, and then this started to happen. And of course, that was a moment in time, and that crab was ripped apart in a few minutes. But, even though it has the bird butt, I felt like it actually helped because then all the attention goes to the crab. And that's really what I wanted the viewer to look at as well. Because I had some other photos where it's starting to pluck its legs off. But those I didn't feel had as much of an impact as just that posture of the crab in this particular one.
No, I really love it. And, you almost have the bird's point of view with this photo. And, you're kind of, the bird is a proxy for the viewer, inviting the viewer into the scene. And, once again, this is a great example of how you can make a wonderful photograph, even if you're working with a rather mundane subject. And so people who think that they need to travel the world to the most exotic places to make amazing photographs, I think ignore the fact that they can make amazing photographs in their own backyard. And this is a photo that really caught my attention. And so I'm curious about this. whether this is a single capture or whether this is a composite of two, are these two birds or is this one bird that's been photographed twice and composited?
No, actually, that's a juvenile that's flying above the adult. And there's a little bit of a story to this, and that's what I thought made it unique as well. I should say that I don't do composites. Everything that I have is pretty much out of the camera. The only time I do what would be considered close to a composite would be like a HDR, where I'm trying to capture the whole dynamic range of a particular image. But generally speaking, my photos are pretty much straight out of the camera. I mean, obviously cropping and basic processing is always part of it. Coming back to the photograph, it's the story here was there was two juveniles that kept harassing the adult for food. And eventually the adult got sick of them and flew to the snag. And the juveniles just kept flying around the adult for a little while before they went back and landed. And the adult just like sat there and was like, yeah, get away from me. I don't want any part of you right now. Like so many adults do.
Well, it's a fantastic photo. And I suspected that it was, in fact, a photo and not a composite. I'm glad to hear you confirm that because I think people too often rely on digital trickery these days. And it's nice to see someone who is just focusing on the art of photography. And I tell people, if you want to make better photographs, it's not going to be in the digital darkroom. You just need to make better photographs. You need to be out there exploring, being creative, trying different things. And that's how you're going to advance as an artist, as a photographer. And so it's just a wonderful photo. What I love about it is how there is a fair amount of repetition of shape, but at the same time, the shapes are very different. So there's this balance that's created by the shape repetition, but there's also energy created by how the shapes diverge. So for example, I'm thinking of the heads of these two owls. They're both roughly in the same position. So there's a repetition of that shape, but then there is divergence of shape. The owl that's flying has got its wings stretched out in this very dynamic way. And that brings a lot of visual energy. So there's a nice balance between symmetry and asymmetry in this photo. It's very dynamic. Once again, we can see that minimalist approach, this broad expanse with just a few tiny penguins walking across. And so photographs like this probably don't do very well on Instagram, where people are reacting to a small thumbnail on their phone. But these are the kind of photos that I really love. Especially when they're blown up big, there is so much for the viewer to discover, these tiny details, these Easter eggs that I mentioned earlier. And so photos like this probably don't translate too well in this kind of oversaturated thumbnail clicking Instagram world that we're living in. And so that can be a bit of a challenge. Do you find that photos like this, you have a harder time connecting with online audiences?
I actually don't take photos for other people. I just take them for myself. So
Great answer.
if they like them, great. If they don't, they don't. I mean, and photography is so subjective anyway, where, like you said, with the thumbnails and the saturation, and the sometimes over processing, etc. I still feel like I'm trying to stay true to the moment, but I'm also trying to stay true to myself. I'm not trying to create an image that's going to sell well, because I find that if I create something that is meaningful to me, there's a better chance for it to be meaningful to somebody else, rather than try and think of, oh, well, if I do this, maybe this will like that thought literally never crosses my mind.
Yeah, I love what you said there about staying true to yourself, taking photos for yourself. And I think that's something that everyone should do. I know some photographers who live and die on the internet. If they're not getting a reaction on Instagram, then they don't post photos like that. And I think that if you're really going to be an artist as a photographer, you need to make work that speaks to you. And that's part of being an artist. Being an artist is seeing things that other people don't see, seeing the magic in the everyday, or seeing these rare moments where shapes and color and the overall visual design converge in a meaningful way. So part of that is just built into this. You are going to be seeing things that other people aren't seeing. The other part of being an artist is finding a way to translate what you see to share that with others. And so that's the challenging part is you want to find the things that other people aren't seeing, but you also want to bring others into that experience. And that's where there's often a disconnect, I think, where you might
Yes,
see
very true.
something really special about a particular subject, but it's not always guaranteed that other people are going to see what you see. They're not, maybe some people might disagree with what you see. They might not think it's as special as you think it is. But a lot of
Right.
times they might just, you might not be able to translate that experience effectively.
Very
And
true.
so with a lot of your photos, I kind of view that you're taking a chance. It's artistic risk, which is a good thing. And I think this photo, one of my favorites of yours, and it really brings home this what I'm talking about here. This really underscores this point. I love that you worked with this dramatic backlighting. I love that most of your subjects are in silhouette. I love that you use the specular highlights creatively here, and having that band of luminous, colorful specular highlight orbs behind the one flamingo that's got its head higher than the rest. So you're highlighting that flamingo's head. You're bringing attention to it. I mean, I think it's a brilliant composition. I think it's a brilliant use of light, but it also doesn't have a lot of color to it. There's a lot of contrast. You can't really see the subjects as effectively as if you had taken a different approach. So I look at a photo like this, you're taking a chance. I personally think it's brilliant, and I hope most other photographers who look at this will recognize the brilliance of this particular technique that you used here. But let me ask you whether you think this is the kind of photo that will connect with people, resonate with people as much as some of your other work.
Yeah. Well, first, thanks. Yeah, I do think it's one of my recent favorites taken in Kenya. Um, yeah. So you brought up a really important point: is taking a risk, and I feel like we talk a lot about creativity, and creativity starts by taking a risk, by trying to be different. You can't take the same photo that somebody has taken before and say you're being creative. That to me just doesn't quite work. But at the same time, if you don't take that risk, well, do you grow photographically at all? If you stay within your comfort zone, and I've done backlight photography. Like I love backlighting. I enjoy using light from different directions. And some people might say, well, why isn't this a full silhouette, or why didn't you bring out the detail? And I played with that in the software and realized, this is what I was seeing. This is what was inspiring. And so therefore I strayed true to the moment. But I also feel like I have just enough detail there, and obviously maybe not seen on a smaller thumbnail, but I have just enough detail where you can clearly identify the birds. So I didn't feel like that was the issue. And this photograph, the story is not about the detail. It's more about, how I'm using the light and how I'm trying to be more expressive with that. And, the shape again is extremely important. It brings your eye straight to it because of the backlighting. And, I love the fact that you can actually see through, I guess, the nostril, or the hole that's in the flamingo's beak. And you can actually see that and see the light coming through that.
Yeah, it's another one of those Easter eggs, one of those
Easter
tiny
eggs.
details that makes a big
I'm going to
difference.
start using that now.
Well, I'm definitely inspired by your work, and I've got a feeling that
Thanks.
other people will be as well. So where can people learn more from you? And, what are some of the workshops and tours that you've got coming up that you think people
Sure.
would benefit from?
Yeah, so my website, nikhilbahl.com. If you have a hard time spelling my name, it's easier to go to experiencenature.us. That'll get you to the same spot. Yeah, most of my workshops are listed there, but I do a lot of workshops in the United States, but also do some abroad, like Iceland, Falkland Islands, which is one of my favorite places to visit. And of course, back home in the US, it's more Yellowstone, and the West Coast is what I really love. But yeah, if you sign up for my newsletter on my website, that's probably the best way to keep in touch. So one of the things I like to do with my workshops and tours is try and make them a little different. And it depends on the location, of course, but a lot of it is about creating an experience for the photographers. Yes, I want them to create great images during the workshop, but that's not always the main goal. It's part of the bigger goal. And the big goal being to have a good time and experience nature at its best and its finest. And I feel like that's when you get the best photographs anyway. So that's what I try and do with my workshops and tours.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I feel like there has been a lot to learn here and definitely some great and inspiring photos. Nikhil, it's so great to connect with you again. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun. Thank you.
All right, take care. Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye.